Can a driver change the course of a historic team with just off-track work? What Hamilton did before the 2025 United States Grand Prix left Vasseur completely shocked. And that's no exaggeration. This could be the true beginning of the Hamilton era at Ferrari. When rumors about Vasseur's possible dismissal began to circulate strongly from the Italian press, the atmosphere at Ferrari became unbreathable. Internally, many doubted his ability to sustain the team's most ambitious technical project since the Michael Schumacher era. The lack of victories, questionable strategic decisions, and a car that has not lived up to expectations set off all the alarms in Maranello. And it was in the midst of that toxic climate when Hamilton decided to act. But his defense was not casual or improvised. It was surgical. It was personal. Lewis did not limit himself to a diplomatic statement before the media. He got right to the heart of the matter. Fred is the main reason I'm on this team. With that phrase, he not only shielded Vasseur's position, but also redrawn the lines of power within Ferrari. What was at stake was no longer just the leadership of the team, but the credibility of the project on which Hamilton had staked his legacy. In the weeks leading up to the United States Grand Prix, Hamilton practically settled in at the Maranello headquarters. It wasn't just about meeting commitments or carrying out tests in the simulator. His agenda was much deeper. He reviewed technical documentation of the SF-25, analyzed correlation data between the wind tunnel and real performance on the track, and most surprisingly, he prepared, together with his group of engineers, an exhaustive report that was sent directly to the team's leadership: John Elkann, Benedetto Vigna, and Frédéric Vasseur. That document was not a set of suggestions, it was a precise X-ray of the structural weaknesses that prevent Ferrari from achieving the consistency it needs to compete with McLaren and Red Bull. Hamilton didn't stop there. He participated in high-level strategic meetings, something unprecedented for a newly arrived pilot. He spoke about the need to redefine the command structure in technical departments, increase collaboration between track engineers and aerodynamic designers, and optimize communication between development and simulation areas. In each conversation, Hamilton did not speak from the ego of the champion, but from the experience accumulated during almost 2 decades facing the best teams in the recent history of Formula One. His speech was technical, methodical, and completely focused on efficiency. In those meetings, several witnesses claimed that Hamilton raised a comparison that surprised everyone. He explained how Mercedes built its golden era not only with technical innovation, but with an organizational culture based on transparency, trust, and precise execution. He stressed that Ferrari does not need to copy that model, but rather build its own modern identity, a balance between historical pride and the methodology of the present. For Hamilton, Ferrari's true weakness is not in its engineers or its resources, but in its mentality, a structure that fears error and punishes initiative. These types of interventions are not common in a pilot. In fact, very few dare to question the foundations of a team from within, especially one as hierarchical as Ferrari. But Hamilton is doing it. And he does it from the authority that only comes from years of experience and the world titles that support him. Vasseur, aware of the caliber of his driver, has not stopped this participation. On the contrary, it has encouraged it. Both have understood that if they want to transform Ferrari, they must do so from the base, not from the surface. Even within the team's technical environment, several engineers have admitted that they have never seen a driver become so deeply involved in data analysis and development planning. Hamilton reviews simulations, studies the car's aerodynamic flows, and proposes adjustments to the general configuration of the car, with such a precise understanding that it surprises the technicians themselves. His obsession with details is beginning to infect the rest of the team, establishing a new culture of shared responsibility, in which each failure is analyzed to learn and not to point blame. His vision is clear. Ferrari should not depend on flashes or isolated genius, but on a structure capable of reproducing success systematically, race after race, year after year. He is convinced that only in this way can they aspire to a new golden cycle. And in that process, his role is that of a silent architect, a strategist who works from the shadows to raise a new era under the values that have always defined him: rigor, perseverance, and purpose. Vasseur knows it. And that is why, when the rumors about his possible dismissal intensified, it was he himself who internally revealed something that reflects what Hamilton is causing within the team. I have never seen a driver commit himself in this way. Not only does he drive for Ferrari, he is helping to rebuild it. That phrase, spoken behind closed doors, reflects the impact that Hamilton is having on the soul of the most legendary team in motorsport. Ferrari appears at the 2025 United States Grand Prix with a strategic decision that has generated more doubts than certainties. the SF25 will not receive any major updates for the remainder of the year. This measure, officially announced by Frédéric Vasseur after the Belgian GP, represents a radical shift in the Scuderia's development philosophy and marks a break with the tradition of continuous improvement that the leading Formula One teams have historically followed. This determination is not born from whim or resignation, but from a crude and realistic evaluation of the available resources in the face of the great challenge posed by the new technical regulations that will come into force in 2026. Vasseur has made one of the riskiest decisions of his management, completely stopping the evolution of the SF25 to redirect all efforts towards the single-seater of the future. In terms of logistics and personnel management, this implies that the Maranello team has begun to progressively dismantle its production lines aimed at 2025, transferring simulator, wind tunnel and CFD analysis hours to the 2026 project. But this sacrifice, although logical in the long term, has a very high price in the present. The SF25 is a single-seater that, since its debut, has demonstrated serious structural limitations that no minor patch can correct. Its main Achilles heel continues to be the extreme sensitivity to ride height, a defect that requires compromising aerodynamic configurations to avoid accelerated wear of the flat bottom, directly affecting cornering stability and traction on exits. In practice, Ferrari has raced all season with a car that operates outside its ideal performance window. In this context, not bringing updates to Austin is like going to war with cracked armor. While McLaren, Red Bull, and even Mercedes continue to introduce new components even if they are marginal, Ferrari limits itself. And this not only affects pure performance but also internal mood. Track engineers, accustomed to working with the expectation of continuous improvement, now must deal with a car that will not change, no matter how much the setup is optimized. The pilots, for their part, are forced to maximize a package that they already know in detail, but whose competitiveness is frozen in time. This decision has generated internal tension in Maranello. There are sectors of the team that considered that it was still possible to introduce minor aerodynamic updates that would mitigate some of the SF25's current problems. Above all, after the reports delivered by Hamilton, where critical areas were pointed out in the load distribution and the response of the rear axle in medium-speed corners. Ignoring these points has been interpreted by some as a wasted opportunity, especially when the championship is not yet mathematically decided and Ferrari is still fighting for important positions in both constructors and drivers. Hamilton, while understanding the logic of focusing on 2026, has diplomatically but firmly expressed that the team cannot give up on the current season. His technical involvement, as we have seen, has been profound, and his frustration at not being able to translate those improvements on the track is tangible. Privately, he has mentioned that strategic decisions must be brave, but also adaptive. In his words, giving up the development of a car without having guaranteed that the next one will be competitive is a dangerous bet. That critical vision is not a rebellion, but the reflection of someone who has experienced the consequences of these choices in the past, both at Mercedes and at McLaren. On the other hand, Vasseur has defended his position with forceful arguments. The changes in the 2026 regulations do not allow room for error. A technical revolution is coming that requires meticulous preparation from this very moment. In his vision, every resource invested today in the SF25 is a resource that will not be available for the car that will truly define Ferrari's future. It is a bet on the medium term, where the aim is not only to be competitive, but also dominant in the new regulatory cycle. However, in Formula One there are no guarantees. Betting on the future without results in the present can backfire very quickly. Sponsors demand exposure, shareholders want results, and fans do not forgive years without glory. Ferrari is walking a tightrope, and the balance between strategic vision and competitive urgency will be decisive in evaluating whether this decision was a masterstroke or a catastrophic miscalculation. In Austin, this invisible tension will manifest itself with every turn of the SF25. A car that has already reached its limit, facing a grille that never stops evolving. And although the calendar moves forward, the real race that Ferrari is running is not against McLaren or Red Bull, but against itself. Against his past of impulsive decisions and against the pressure to finally build a structure that can sustain success beyond one season. Now that you know the magnitude of what is happening at Ferrari, the question is no longer whether Hamilton can win with the SF25, but whether he is building something much bigger than a one-time victory. I want to know your opinion. Do you think Hamilton's impact at Ferrari is being underestimated? Or do you think that these cultural and strategic transformations are not enough if they do not immediately translate into results on the track? Where would you put the line between patience and demand? Leave it to me in the comments.